memories, light the corners of my mind. You know those words, you know the melody. You might not remember where you first heard them, but they're in there, somewhere between a lullaby and a bruise, permanently installed. That's what The Way We Were does. One song, one sidewalk, one woman brushing the hair from a man's face and saying goodbye forever. And 50 years later, people still fly to New York just to stand outside the Plaza Hotel where that goodbye happened. The Way We Were came out in October 1973, directed by Sidney Pollack. Barbra Streisand as Katie Morosky, fierce, principled, impossible to look away from, and Robert Redford as Hubbell Gardner, golden, effortless, just self-aware enough to know he's not as good as everyone thinks. They fall in love in college, they reunite after the war, they get married, the McCarthyite Red Scare tears them apart. And then Hubbell is gone, and Katie is on a sidewalk, and that's it. What started as a novel nobody wanted turned into a film a studio executive called Career Ending, starring a leading man who turned it down 8 times, with a title song the leading lady tried to keep out. It made $50 million, won 2 Oscars. The AFI named it the 6th greatest love story ever made. Today we're counting down 15 weird facts about The Way We Were. Stick around for number 1. The story of how the title song almost never existed will genuinely stop you cold. Hit that like button and subscribe before we dive in. It genuinely helps the chan. Now, let's count down from 15. Number 15. Robert Redford wore 2 athletic supporters for the love scene. Let's open with the one nobody brings up at dinner. The Way We Were features a love scene between 2 of the biggest stars in Hollywood. Barbra Streisand, who wore a thin mesh bikini and brassiere under the sheets. Robert Redford, who arrived on set wearing 2 athletic supporters stacked on top of each other. According to costume designer Moss Mabry, cited in Robert Hoffler's 2023 book, The Way They Were, Redford wore the double layer because, there is no diplomatic way to say this, he was afraid of getting an erection with Streisand, who had a reputation for getting close to her leading men. 2 supporters, just to be safe. The problem? The outline showed clearly through the sheets. Pollack could see it. Everyone could see it. So Redford, under the covers, discreetly slid them both off, pushed them under the bed, finished the scene, and quietly retrieved them before getting up. Streisand wore a bikini. Redford later described the expression on her face as more reacting than acting. Editor John Burnett was reportedly amazed at how much footage he had to work through, just to assemble what should have been a straightforward scene. At some point, Pollack wrapped it. 2 of the most beautiful people in Hollywood, 1 love scene, 2 jock straps, and an editor who needed a minor miracle. Oops, the chemistry you see on screen was 100% real and 100% protected. Number 14. Redford said no so many times. The director nearly gave up. Robert Redford did not want to make this film. He turned it down repeatedly, by most accounts, at least 8 times over the course of months, and yet his face is on every poster. His objection was specific. He told director Sidney Pollack directly, "Who is this guy? He's just an object. He doesn't want anything. What does this guy want?" And in a 2010 interview with Oprah, Redford put it even more plainly. "Otherwise, I would be a Ken doll." And that was for somebody else. Pollack spent more time convincing Redford to say yes than he had spent on anything in his entire career. He said so himself. Meanwhile, producer Ray Stark ran out of patience and gave Pollack 1 final hour. If Redford didn't commit immediately, Stark was hiring Ryan O'Neal. Pollack went back to Redford, wore him down, and got a yes. Yeah, that's how close it was. Streisand, filming another movie in Africa at the time, received the news by telegram from agent Sue Mengers. It read, Barbara Redford. 2 words. She later said she screamed with joy reading it. Here's the twist. Redford's refusal to play a Ken doll forced 11 rewrites that actually deepened the character. Streisand admitted in her memoir, Bob's reluctance had a big influence on the script and ultimately resulted in a richer, more interesting character. The man who kept saying no accidentally made the film better. He walked in saying he wouldn't be a Ken doll and walked out with what many consider the finest performance of his career. Number 13. A studio executive heard the pitch and said, "Are you trying to kill me?" Before any casting, before any screenplay, before Robert Redford said no the first time, a studio executive sat in a room and heard what this film was going to be. A love story, set against the Hollywood blacklist and McCarthyism, starring Barbra Streisand. No musical numbers, and her character is a communist. According to author Tom Santapietro's book, The Way We Were, The Making of a Romantic Classic, the executive's exact response was, "Barbra Streisand doesn't sing and she plays a communist. Are you trying to kill me?" And weirdly, that's not an absurd reaction. Streisand's biggest movies, Funny Girl, Hello Dolly, are musicals. Her whole brand at that moment is The Voice. A non-singing political drama about the Red Scare is not what her audience showed up for. The executive wasn't wrong about what she was. He just couldn't see what she could become. The Way We Were opened October 1973, made $50 million on a $5 million budget, 6 Oscar nominations, 2 wins. Title song went to #1 for 3 weeks. The AFI put it at #6 on the greatest love stories ever filmed. The executive who said that is now remembered only for saying that. The film he tried to talk people out of won 2 Oscars and is ranked among the greatest love stories ever made. Number 12, the real ending was completely different and much harder to watch. The ending, you know, 2 people who loved each other meeting outside the Plaza Hotel years later, knowing it's over, knowing it was real, walking away. Your girl is lovely, Hubbell. A brush of his hair, a taxi. Gone? That's not what screenwriter Arthur Laurents wrote. Not even close. In Lawrence's original climax, Hubbell comes home from the studio and tells Katie directly, they're going to fire him because she's a subversive. If she won't inform on her communist friends, he loses his job. Her answer? There's a very easy solution. You won't have a subversive wife. We'll get a divorce. She chooses her principles over her marriage, over the man she loves. That was the scene that got cut. Laurents said in a 1981 interview, the audience needed to understand how much Katie's principles meant to her, that she could divorce a man she loved rather than betray what she believed in. Without it, the split feels incomplete. Even critics at the time noted the couple seemed to simply fall out of love without resolving anything. After Redford's death in 2025, Streisand announced she had kept the original outtakes for decades. She added the missing political scenes back into a new extended version, now available on Amazon. The ending 50 million people have seen for 50 years is not the film Arthur Laurents wrote. The one he wrote is more devastating, more specific, and much harder to argue with. It makes the breakup mean something. He wrote the real one. They filmed the famous one. And somehow the famous one still makes people cry. Number 11. Hollywood's most famous straight love story was written by a gay man about his own life. Here's the fact that reframes everything. Katie Morosky, the passionate, driven, politically committed Jewish woman who falls hopelessly for a golden boy who can't quite meet her on her own level, is not based on a woman. She's based on Arthur Laurents, the screenwriter, who was gay. Laurents, who also wrote West Side Story and Gypsy, based the entire film on his real relationship with his longtime partner, Tom Hatcher, a handsome, blue-eyed, blonde Gentile who worked as an actor without much success, and who Laurents described as his own personal gorgeous goy. Hubbell is Tom. Katie is Arthur. The dynamic is identical. The passionate, striving one who loves more than they receive, endlessly drawn to the beautiful golden boy who coasts. In 1973, Laurents couldn't make a film about a gay relationship and get it financed. So he changed the gender and called it a love story. It became one of the most beloved heterosexual romances in cinema history. And for decades, he let people believe Katie was based on a woman he'd known at Cornell. In his posthumously published memoir, he finally wrote simply, "Katie is mainly me." Every woman who has ever seen herself in Katie was identifying with a gay Jewish man's real heartbreak, translated across gender without losing a single thing. The film never would have been made as the story Laurents actually lived. So he changed one word. He called it a love story. Number 10. The composer paid for the orchestra himself, out of his own pocket. The title song was not in the original cut of The Way We Were. After the first test screening, it was left out of the final scene entirely. The farewell at the plaza, the brush of the hair, the taxi. The audience sat through it unmoved, no tears. complete silence. Marvin Hamlish had written the song. He believed he knew exactly what it could do at that moment. He begged Columbia Pictures to let him rescore the finale. They said yes, on one condition. He had to pay for the recording session himself. That meant a 55-piece orchestra. Hamlish said it was not mere pocket change. He paid anyway. Then he ran a second test screening with the song in the final scene. He was in the room. He heard one woman start to cry, then another, then another. Within minutes, he said, there wasn't a dry eye left. I knew I was right, and that made it worth every penny. The song went back in. Obviously, here's what that required. A young composer bet his own money on a song the studio didn't believe in, for a scene the studio thought worked without it, on a film that had already nearly destroyed itself in production. He had no guarantee of anything. He just knew. Number 9, test audiences walked away from the politics. Pollock used scissors at midnight. The original cut of The Way We Were was built around a serious political argument, the Hollywood blacklist. Katie's communist associations threatening Hubbell's career. Screenwriter Arthur Laurents had written it as a love story framed by the Red Scare, and the political dimension was the whole point. Then the first preview screening happened. Pollock described it. At first the film was going very, very well until we hit a spot in the third act where we just lost the audience completely. In his biography of Streisand, author James Spada quotes Pollock saying simply, "The politics just got too complicated for the audience. They wanted us to stick with the love story. The problem, Pollock didn't have a moviola at the preview location, so he and editor Margaret Booth took physical scissors and a razor blade, literally cut the film by hand, and removed 7 to 8 minutes of political material in the late hours of that night. A second preview the following day, the audience loved it. Streisand was heartbroken. She said losing those scenes devastated her and called the political content the entire point. Laurents said the film had lost its climax. Producer Ray Stark said they had to choose between the love story and the politics. The film was assembled by hand with scissors between midnight and dawn. The scenes that gave the breakup its moral weight were on the cutting room floor before anyone bought a ticket. New Yorker critic Pauline Kael called the result a torpedoed ship full of gaping holes that somehow came snugly into port. The ship made $50 million. The gaping holes went with it. Number 8. Streisand. Had a crush on Redford. The first love scene took 2 full days. According to Robert Hoefler's book, The Way They Were, Barbra Streisand was, in his words, infatuated and mesmerized by Robert Redford throughout filming. Hoefler told Fox News, "It was very obvious to everyone that she had a crush on him. Neil Gabler, in his biography of Streisand, wrote that she was too crazy about Bob. She has described him in interviews as an intellectual cowboy with a wonderful jawline and great teeth, and noted she was drawn to his complexity, not his appearance. She then listed his appearance. Now, here's the detail. The first intimate scene between the two leads, the one where Redford's character, slightly drowsy, moves towards Streisand's and then falls asleep, took 2 full days to film. 2 days, according to Hoefler, for a scene where Redford does nothing. Producer Ray Stark was furious. The film was already over budget and over schedule. Hoefler's explanation, Streisand kept requesting take after take. Redford, who typically did his best work in the first take and lost focus rapidly after the third, was reportedly done by lunchtime on day 1. Pollock described their working styles plainly. Barbra wanted precision, Redford spontaneity. Barbra likes lengthy rehearsals and multiple takes. The scene that took 2 days to film runs about 90 seconds on screen. Every frame of it is electric. Nobody watching ever suspects a thing. Number 7. Streisand refused to sing the title song. Then she saw the test footage. Here's the detail that reframes the whole film. Barbra Streisand did not want to sing The Way We Were. Not because she disliked the song. She'd called it too sentimental, but she'd recorded it. She didn't want it used in the film at all. Her reason was professional pride. She had spent years trying to be taken seriously as a dramatic actress, not just a singer who happened to make movies. Singing the title song over the final scene felt like a step backward, like she was falling into exactly the box she'd been fighting to climb out of. She wanted the film to stand on its own without a Barbra Streisand concert moment at the end. Then the early test screenings happened, and something she hadn't expected. Redford was getting the bigger reaction. His performance was registering so strongly that Streisand became genuinely worried he was outshining her in her own picture. According to TCM's production notes, it was that fear that Redford was stealing the film that made her change her mind about the song. If she sang it, the film ended on her voice. On her. She agreed. The song stayed. Turns out, the only way to get Barbra Streisand to sing was to convince her someone else was stealing her movie. Number 6. Redford refused to say one line because it implied he was bad in bed. During filming of the second intimate scene, there was a scripted line for Redford's character to say to Streisand's. The line was, "It'll be better this time." Redford refused to say it. According to Robert Hofler's book, Redford believed the line implied his character, and by extension himself, was not good in bed. Redford was never bad in bed, Hofler noted, so his character couldn't be either. He simply would not deliver it. Producer Ray Stark was furious. He wanted the scene reshot with the line spoken clearly. He thought it was chivalrous of Hubbell to acknowledge the awkwardness of their first encounter and promise improvement. Screenwriter Arthur Laurents wrote a memo expressing his own outrage at the refusal. Director Pollock had originally agreed the line was important. All three men wanted the line in the film. Redford still said no. Nope, not saying it. Hofler contacted him about it later, by email. Redford answered several of his other questions. He did not answer this one. So Pollock, exhausted and outwitted, sided with his star and declared the line superfluous. It was cut. It never appears in the film. Robert Redford is never bad in bed. The record will reflect that. He made sure of it. Number 5, Hollywood's most famous romantic couple went 37 years without a single joint interview. In 1973, Robert Redford starred in 2 films, The Way We Were with Barbra Streisand and The Sting with Paul Newman. The Sting was the number 1 film at the U.S. box office that year. The Way We Were was number 3. Paul Newman was his co-star in one, Barbra Streisand in the other. Redford and Newman did press together. Of course they did. They were a legendary partnership. Redford and Streisand, not one interview. Not that year, not the year after. Not for 37 years. They didn't do a single joint interview from the time they finished filming in 1973 until 2010, when Oprah Winfrey engineered their first ever on-camera reunion by surprising Streisand mid-interview with a walking out Redford. The audience went up like a rocket. Streisand hugged him. Then she looked at him and asked why they had never sat down together after all this time. Redford's answer, "Because I never thought I'd get a word in." Streisand laughed, then said, "True." The interview ran about 20 minutes. It was the first time Oprah had ever gotten Redford on her show, too. He'd apparently been avoiding that as well. Number 4, Streisand originally wanted her ex. Their real romance cooled, then she fought, 2 years for Redford. Instead. Here's a detail that makes this whole production feel like it was scripted. When The Way We Were was first being developed, Barbra Streisand and producer Ray Stark already had a leading man in mind. Not Robert Redford, Ryan O'Neal. Streisand and O'Neal had just made What's Up, Doc? Together and started a real romantic relationship during that shoot. By casting time, the real-life romance had cooled. The chemistry had evaporated. Streisand no longer wanted to work with O'Neal. She decided only Redford would make the film work. She told Pollock, "Give him anything he wants. Pay him anything. Just get Redford." Redford said no, and kept saying no. For months. While O'Neal waited in the wings, Stark was using O'Neal as leverage, threatening to cast him if Redford didn't commit. Which means the actor Streisand had abandoned for this project was now the threat being used to pressure the man she'd decided she had to have instead. Redford eventually said yes. O'Neal went on to make Paper Moon that same year, which won his daughter Tatum the Oscar. Streisand got the film she wanted. Director Pollock said the chemistry between Streisand and Redford was there from their very first read-through, a lightning bolt. The two people who had never worked together produced something the two who had actually dated couldn't have. Number 3, The Composer. Won 3 Oscars in one night. Nobody has done it before or since. The 1974 Academy Awards ceremony handed out music prizes for films released in 1973. 3 of those Oscars went to the same person. Marvin Hamlisch, the composer who had paid for his own 55-piece orchestra out of pocket because the studio wouldn't, walked to the podium 3 times that night. Best Original Song for The Way We Were, Best Original Dramatic Score for The Way We Were, Best Adaptation Score for The Sting. 3 Oscars, 1 evening. Still the only time it has ever happened. And here's the detail that makes it better. Both films starred Robert Redford, both directed by Sidney Pollack, both released the same year. Hamlisch scored them both, swept every music category at the Oscars, and became the first, and still the only, composer in Academy history to win 3 music Oscars in a single night. When Marilyn Bergman accepted the Best Song Award alongside Hamlisch, she looked at him and said, "Marvin, it's positively obscene how many of these you have." And Redford? He was nominated for Best Actor that night. For The Sting, not for The Way We Were. He lost to Jack Lemmon. The composer who bet his own money on a song the studio didn't believe in walked out with 3 trophies, 1 personal check, 3 Oscars. That's some return on investment. Number 2. Both stars sued the producer. After the film made $50 million. The Way We Were made $50 million on a $5 million budget, and then 2 of its biggest stars hired lawyers. According to Arthur Laurents' memoir, both Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford had to sue producer Ray Stark to recover their percentage of the film's gross. Stark had structured the deal in a way that shut both of them out of the profits. Both pursued legal action. Laurents documented it plainly as one of the ways Stark routinely operated. Meanwhile, Stark was already in a separate legal dispute with Streisand over her solo album. She had released a studio album called The Way We Were at the same time as the film's official soundtrack. Stark sued, arguing it was pulling sales from his Rastar Productions soundtrack album. Streisand had to re-release her record under one of the most awkward album titles in history. Barbra Streisand featuring The Way We Were and All in Love is Fair. Despite the mouthful of a title, that album went to number 1. 3 lawsuits from 1 film. Streisand versus Stark over the album. Streisand versus Stark over the gross. Redford versus Stark over the gross. And here's what that glosses over. Stark was the man who had greenlit the whole thing in the first place, who believed in the film when a studio executive said it would be a disaster, who delivered the $50 million that everyone then sued him over. Number 1. The song Streisand called Too Sentimental became the biggest song of 1974. Let's close where the film closes, on a song that nearly didn't exist. Marvin Hamlisch wrote the melody in major key because he feared a minor key would telegraph the ending too early. He wanted hope in it, sadness wrapped in something still warm. Then he and lyricists Alan and Marilyn Bergman performed it for Streisand at her home. She liked it enough, made a few suggestions. Hamlisch thought they were done. On the way home, Alan Bergman turned to him and said, maybe they could do even better. Hold on, they reworked it. The opening line became, "Memories light the corners of my mind." Hamlisch played the new version for Streisand. She listened, then said it was too sentimental. She wasn't sure she wanted to record it. She recorded it. Session bassist Carol Kay, who played bass on the track, said it required 33 takes and called it one of the most memorable sessions of her career. Producer Marty Paich worked 4 hours of recording, followed by 4 hours of mixing through the night to finish it. The Way We Were was released as a single on September 27, 1973. It hit number 1 on February 2, 1974, Streisand's first ever chart topper, and stayed there for 3 consecutive weeks. It won the Oscar for Best Original Song, the Grammy for Song of the Year. Billboard named it the biggest song of 1974. Inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 2008. The woman who wasn't sure she even wanted to record it is the only reason anyone remembers it at all. And there you have it. 15 weird facts about The Way We Were. The movie that didn't happen by design. It happened in spite of everything. Every argument, every rewrite, every razor blade cut in the dark, every test audience that sat silent while the room needed to cry, all of it led to exactly the film that exists. Which facts surprised you most? Let us know in the comments below. And hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Until next time.